At UFC 291, all eyes will be on Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje as the two gladiators lock horns in a clash for the ages. The fight has violence written all over it, but don't let this glorious main event fool you into ignoring the other fights on the card, starting with the second match on the prelim card, Lewis vs. De Lima. Derek Lewis is an absolute legend of the sport and the man with the most knockouts in UFC heavyweight history, but his most recent run of defeats has made many believe that his best years may be behind him. Lewis is currently riding a 3-fight losing streak and has lost 4 out of his last 5 fights. On the other hand, De Lima is on a decent run of 2 victories. Lewis is a classic stand and bang fighter who waits for the perfect opportunity to unleash his venomous one-punch knockout power. De Lima is a lot more aggressive in comparison, and he marches forward with mean intentions until he gets his knockout. Like Lewis, the Brazilian is a finisher, as 14 out of his 21 wins have come by way of knockout. De Lima is also a decent grappler, but Lewis has fought better fighters. Expect this one to be an all-out stand-up fight, which can go either way. My money's on De Lima. The final fight on the UFC 291 prelims is one to keep an eye on, especially when it features the highly touted Gabriel Bonfim, who will take on Trevin Giles in a welterweight fight. Bonfim is an undefeated 14-0 fighter with a 100% finish rate. Bonfim is a grappler ace who is a terror on the mat, but he can crack as well. His takedown and submissions threat create openings for him to hurt his opponent on the feet. Trevin Giles is a very silent fighter who is good everywhere. He has a great boxing fundamentals and ground game. He is very technical and has good cardio and endurance. So if he manages to keep the fight on the feet, he will make this a very interesting fight, but that's a big if. As good as Gal is, I think Bonfim gets the job done with the submission as usual. The main card kicks off with a welterweight bout between perennial contenders Michael Chiesa and Kevin Holland. Chiesa hasn't fought since 2021, and on top of that, he is coming off back-to-back losses, so his confidence won't be as high compared to Holland, who has been actively competing in the past 2 years, with his most recent win coming against Santiago Ponzinibbio by knockout. It's your typical grappler versus striker contest, with Kevin Holland being levels ahead in the striking department, while Chiesa being the better wrestler and submission artist by a good margin, so whoever managed to execute his game plan better will win. Normally in such a fight, the grapplers is favored, but I think activity will play a key role here. Expect Kevin Holland to hand Chiesa his 3rd straight loss by second round TKO. Next up on the main card is a very intriguing lightweight fight between Tony Ferguson and Bobby Green. Once considered the boogeyman of the lightweight division, Ferguson is struggling with 5 consecutive defeats, most recently against Nate Diaz in an awful fight at UFC 279. But Bobby Green hasn't won his last 3 fights too, so he's definitely a step down in competition that Ferguson really needed. That being said, it's still a tough fight for an agent. El Kakui, the former interim lightweight champion, is slow and sloppy these days, and although he has some good moments in the recent fights, he doesn't look like the Tony Ferguson of old who used to terrorize fighters with his unorthodox style. Green is an orthodox fighter with solid boxing fundamentals and a very good ground game, and he's also one of the toughest fighters in the division. It would be a fairly interesting fight, but I think Ferguson loses again and rides into the sunset. Stephen Thompson versus Mikael Pereira is a fantastic fight between 2 highly rated strikers with completely different styles. In his last 8 fights, each of Thompson's 4 victories have come against strikers, so this is a fairly favorable matchup for the former UFC welterweight title challenger. But then again, Pereira is on an impressive winning streak and has the style to catch Stephen Thompson off guard, as Anthony Pettis did. Thompson is a conventional striker with a wide stance and a wide array of kicks, including spinning attack. Wonderboy is a master when it comes to range kicking and all-in-out stand-up fight. Not many can beat him. He's a big welterweight, controls distance to perfection with occasional burst of aggression. But if there's anyone who can surprise him on the feet, it's Pereira, who's a wild man and does all kinds of weird stuff in the octagon, including backflips, Superman punches, and Showtime kicks. The Brazilian's a massive welterweight with incredible speed and power in his shots, and that's a bit of worry for Thompson. The good thing is Pereira does get tired as the rounds progress, so if Wonderboy can survive the early onslaught, he'll take over. Don't expect a lot of grappling in this one. I think Wonderboy takes a unanimous decision here, although I won't be surprised if Pereira pulls off the upset. Next up is the co-main event. Alex Pereira had a short but sweet career at middleweight, where he only fought 5 times but captured the middleweight title and then lost it in his first title defense, with both title fights coming against his arch rival Israel Adesanya. He most recently fought at UFC 287, where he was knocked out in the second round by Izzy, and he's now moving up to light heavyweight to face off one of the toughest guys in the division, former champ Jan Blachowicz. This could well be a potential title eliminator, with the winner fighting Yuri for the vacant title since Jamal Hill is out due to injury. Pereira, as we know, is a highly technical kickboxer who likes to stand and trade in the pocket. His biggest weapon is his thunderous left hook, and his kicks are devastating as well. The Brazilian's wrestling is suspect, however, that's a weakness Blachowicz can exploit. The former champ is a very smart and well-rounded fighter. Like Pereira, he's a kickboxer, but he likes to fight at range and chop his opponents down with low and body kicks before unleashing his legendary Polish power on them. Blachowicz would try to stay at range and avoid trading punches with Pereira and rely more on outpointing him with kicks. But if he chooses to close the distance and resort to wrestling, that's even better. Blachowicz is a strong, technical, but a physical specimen and can outmuscle Pereira on the mat. Pereira is working on his wrestling a lot, but is he good enough to hold his own against Blachowicz? It's hard to say. I'm going to pick Alex Pereira by TKO. Somehow I can see him landing that left hook, starting to the body, and then getting Jan Blachowicz to drop his hands and hitting him with that powerful left hook to the jaw and putting him out. That ultimately brings us to the fight you all have been waiting for. The rematch between Dustin the Diamond Poirier and Justin the Highlight Gaethje. The last time these two legends fought was in 2018, when Poirier won by stoppage early in the 4th round after 3 rounds of war. Gaethje smashed Poirier's lead leg, but constantly ran into Poirier's 6-punch combos, which was his undoing. Since their first fight, both fighters have won 6 times and lost twice, both to Charles Oliveira and Khabib Nurmagomedov in title fights. Poirier is better than he was 5 years ago, whereas Gaethje has come leaps and bounds and has become a far more calculated version of himself. He doesn't fight like a zombie walking into counterattacks anymore. Instead, he stays firm on his feet and draws his opponent into lead 2-punch combos on counters while chipping away with low kicks. Poirier is slightly better than Gaethje in the sense that he lands 5-punch combos when he gets going, and that's an extremely tough man to face on the feet. It's going to be another banger of a fight, but it will be much closer and a lot more strategic than the last time around if it stays on the feet. Should the fight go to the mat, Poirier will have the edge since he regularly utilizes his wrestling in BJJ in fights, whereas Gaethje doesn't, despite having a solid background in wrestling. Gaethje will be a tough man to take down, so it'll be an interesting battle on the mat. I think the fight stays on the feet throughout, and Poirier takes a razor-close split decision victory. So that's how I see the fight playing out. What are your predictions? Let me know in the comments.